Frodo now has an interaction over the course of the story with Boromir, and I'm curious as to how their interaction reveals different approaches to responsibility, and what about their interaction illuminates Frodo's particular strengths.
Yeah, I think that people who have only seen the movies have an unduly negative perspective on Boromir, that if you actually read the books, and Boromir is very clearly a hero. He's a tragic hero who obviously has a fall, as tragic heroes do. But he is very much a hero, and we should have some sympathy for him, recognizing that this is somebody who lived his entire life under the shadow of Mordor, that he lived his whole life right on the doorstep of radical evil. And that's going to have an impact on your psychology, right? And so somebody who rightly has been fighting his entire life, like when he comes in contact with the ring, his solution is, well, let's keep fighting, because that's what he knows. And even though he acquiesces at the council and says, okay, we'll do it your way, we'll go destroy the ring because that's what everyone says what we should do. Okay. But still he has that sense of, this is not actually going to work. Like, I know it works. The sword works. And so, he has this fighter mentality, which is a good thing in the right context. The problem is he loses that context. He loses the context actually in which fighting is appropriate, which of course is a lesson that Faramir would learn, that the sword is important for defending that which is worth loving, but the sword isn't ultimate. But Boromir, he doesn't quite get that lesson down. And so, he wants to use the ring as a weapon. And to the point where, and the ring continues to draw on him, that even though he didn't have direct access to the ring, still just being in proximity, it pulls on his heart, it draws him toward it, power is drawn to power. But of course, the lesson that we learn again and again in Tolkien's writing is that not that power is bad, but those who most desire to seize power are ultimately seized by power. And so he is pulled to the ring. He reaches for it, tries to take it from Frodo, but of course Frodo isn't going to have that. And I think that the reason why Frodo doesn't fall, he doesn't fail until the very end, is because he has this firm sense of not the pragmatic, like, how do I solve this particular problem, but he has this duty to fate. He recognizes what is supposed to be done. And as I said early in this conversation, he has this perspective of faith of, I don't know how I'm going to get to the conclusion, to the finish line. I just know if I keep walking, I'm going to end up there. And so he has this perspective of faith in his walk, whereas Boromir is highly pragmatic. This will work. And I think that marks a key difference in their approach to perceived virtue.
Yeah, and of course, a great illustration for us all with respect to just the step ahead is all that I need to apply myself to, rather than trying to come up with a grand scheme and strategy for the entire endeavor. I'd love to turn to broader themes and a little bit of legacy. Frodo often expresses doubt about his worthiness for the task ahead, yet, as you said, he continues forward. And so I'd love to just put a bow on the ideas of duty, sacrifice, perseverance, not just for Frodo's character, but also in our own journeys as people on this earth today.
Yeah, I mean, as we've been discussing, that Frodo, he isn't concerned with the, what lies ahead. He just knows where he's supposed to go. And so, he just continues to move in that direction, trusting that, like, if he's taking the proper steps, he's going to end up where he's supposed to be. And I think that walk of faith is obviously something that can apply to us today, that a lot of times the virtuous path, that the demonstrations of pity, the offering of grace, like, these aren't things that often pragmatically lead to the solutions that we desire, but they're the right things to do, that we are called to execute. And as we do those things that, may seem foolish, but we know are good, we'll end up in the place that we want to be. If nothing else, we'll be the people that we want to be. And that itself is a good place to be, regardless of our circumstances. And so I think that he demonstrates this prioritization of virtue for the sake of virtue. Duty because it's the right thing to do, and that everything else is secondary and will play out as it needs to. And yeah, maybe it'll cost you your life in the end, but at least it'll be a life worth living. This is something that I talk about a lot when I teach Beowulf, that Beowulf, in all of his conflicts, his major conflicts with the monsters, Grendel, Grendel's mother, the dragon, he always says something like, it's, I know that I have a responsibility to engage in this conflict. I don't know that I'm going to win. That's up to God to decide. But what's up to me is to play the hero. And then things will work out how they work out. And that's because, in the end, like, we're all going to die. But we're not all going to live lives that make that death significant. And so that should be our focus, right? We can't avoid death.
Good.
But what we can do is embrace a worthwhile life.
Yes. And as you pointed out, we can't control the outcome, but we can step up. And in the end, over the course of time, that will be a life that has been worth living. A great reminder. I'd love to talk a little bit about Tolkien's, as you referenced earlier, his grand essay on fairy stories, which I believe was originally a talk. And I've read it a few times. But the concept of the eucatastrophe, his term, and of course, Tolkien, a world-renowned philologist, can coin terms as he sees fit, as far as I'm concerned. But the eucatastrophe is a sudden turn of events that brings about a happy ending. And of course, it plays out dramatically in Frodo's story. How would you sort of articulate that turn for Frodo specifically, and then also just Tolkien's mindset about that and what it might say about God, what it might say about the human soul?
Yeah, and so we see this a number of times in Lord of the Rings and throughout Tolkien's writings. We see this idea of eucatastrophe, of the happy turn, where it seems like everything's falling into utter ruin, and then suddenly there's a great reversal. And I mean, of course, Tolkien grounds this in the gospel, that you have the death of Christ followed by the resurrection. It seems like for a time that the good guys lost, right? That the disciples disperse, they go back to their jobs, like everything seems to be in despair. And then we get to the resurrection, where what seemed to be the greatest ruin was actually the preparation for the greatest victory. And we see this throughout Lord of the Rings. I mean, we see this in the death of Gandalf. Kind of became a eucatastrophe for Frodo's own character arc, that what seemed to be utter ruin was actually exactly what he needed to become the person he's supposed to be. And of course, it gets stretched out to the resurrection of sorts of Gandalf himself. But looking specifically at the character arc of Frodo, we see a eucatastrophe in that event. We see eucatastrophe in, I mean, obviously at the Cracks of Doom, where it seems like we're falling into utter ruin, where now he's going to keep the ring and just go march off and do whatever. But then Gollum actually becomes the eucatastrophe here, sent by Providence to attack Frodo and bite off his finger. Not the kind of thing you're going to ask for, but it's exactly what is needed to achieve victory. And this idea of eucatastrophe, it's very much drawn from Tolkien's baptism of the northern mythos, where in the northern mythology, which really makes it unique from most other mythologies, like in the end, the good guys lose. Like the gods are killed by the monsters. Like that's really the main eschatology of the northern peoples. And Tolkien looked at that from a temporal earthly sense and said, yeah, they're actually right. This is the idea of the long defeat, that in the long run, things are going to wind down, fires are going to burn out, we're headed for the endless winter that will then suddenly give way to spring. And so this is Tolkien's idea of cosmic history, that things, we'll have our victories here and there, but for the most part, things are going to get worse and worse. It's why in his own legendarium, the glories are always in the past. Like we get these echoes of, the return of Numenor of sorts and Aragorn, like we get these echoes of the past, but in the long run, the past is better than the present and certainly better than the future. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse until they get suddenly better with the restoration of all things, which is his own eschatology as well as his eschatology for his legendarium, because that is an extension of his own belief system. And so we see this in the grand cosmic scale of his story, as well as again and again and again on the minor level in the progression of Lord of the Rings, in the progression of the life of Frodo. I mean, even when Frodo and Sam are approaching Mount Doom, you've got Aragorn and the forces of the West at the Black Gates, and then the eagles fly over, which the eagles are always a major sign of eucatastrophe, that something good is about to happen. The gods have not forsaken you.
Yes.